So we did implement a find all users, right, inside our client, right? This admin user service client that implements a find all users, and you're free to use this for your own purposes, for your own assignment. Let's implement a couple more. Let's implement delete. Let's implement delete, since delete, we want to delete some of these, right, that are kind of useless here. This undefined and undefined. Let's remove those two, right? So how do we do that? Well, let's see. When we are rendering these users, notice that we implement this delete button. See that? This delete button, and when we click on that delete button, we call this delete user and pass along the index of the user. Yes, right? That index of the user is being used by this delete user right here, and that delete user has the index right there. See that? So that means that this users, right, this array of users, it's splicing out using the index. Well, I don't really, notice that if I delete it here, if I delete and I refresh, notice that I haven't really deleted anything, right? We want to delete it from the server, right, to make it permanent, okay? And we know how to do that. We know that if we go to delete, remove user, we just need to do a delete, send a delete to this particular URL and pass in the ID of the user that we want to remove. Yes? Right, let's do that. So where can I find that ID? Well, that ID should be as part of the JSON object that comes back that I iterated over in the array, right? That I copied in my local array. Yes? So my local array should have all those objects with the correct IDs. So I should be able to get a hold of that user. Let user equal users sub index. That should be my index, right? So I should be able to say console log user. Right, so if I refresh and I click on undefined, that's my object. See that? And there's my ID. There it is. Right, so I can get a hold of the ID. I can say let underscore ID equal user dot underscore ID. So I can print it out, the ID. Right, so if I remove undefined, there's my ID, Alice. All those are my IDs. As long as I can send a delete message to the server will permanently remove that user from the remote array. Make sense? In the database. All right, so let's do that. So how do we do that? Well, we need to call this delete over here, right? That is already ready to accept the user ID. All right. So how do we do this? So we need to send a delete HTTP request. Right. Again, we're going to use fetch to the URL, self URL. But the URL needs to have the URL and then the ID concatenated at the end, right? And we could do that by doing plus slash plus the user ID. We could do that, yes. Or better yet, we can use the new syntax, right? The backtick syntax. We can use backtick. This is an expression, right? We don't use concatenation. User ID like that. Everybody good? All right. Now this would be a get. Remember, by default, fetch uses a get. It sends an HTTP get. If you want to use something other than get, you need to tell it, right? And to do that, we use a configuration object, an optional configuration object, where we can specify a whole bunch of other things, right? We can specify that instead of using the default get HTTP method, we can say that we want to use instead the delete HTTP method. All right. And then this again is going to return a promise. It's going to return some data saying, how many records were removed, usually just one, right? So we're going to return this. We're going to return. All right. Let's see if we can use it. All right. So in our delete here, we have the user, we have the ID. There it is. There's our ID. And what we're going to do is that we're going to now use our user service dot delete user. Delete user. And we're going to pass the ID. I'm going to pass the ID. Okay. The ID is going to go out to the server. It's going to come back with a promise, and we can listen for that promise. That promise will tell us whether it was successful or not. We don't really care. We're going to ignore it. We could handle error messages, but we're not going to do that now. We're gonna when we come back in a little later, we'll talk about how to handle errors, catch errors, and whatnot. Yes. For now, we're going to be optimistic and that everything went dandy, right? Everything was okay. So here comes the response, which I'm going to ignore. The response is going to tell me, how many elements were removed. It was successful. Blah blah blah. I don't really care. What we're going to do here, though, is that we're going to actually do the splicing of the local array. I'm going to do the splicing of the local array, and then I'm going to render, right? Notice that really I would have to catch errors. The error might be that, hey, I can't find that user. I don't know, it's not in the database. Or the server might be down, so I could time out. So probably it could happen that I don't actually am able to remove from the remote server, right? But notice that locally I am being very optimistic and I'm going to remove from my local array. So I run the risk of the two arrays being out of sync, where the remote server, it did not remove from the remote server, but I'm removing it from the local array. So there is a risk here of not being successful and going out of sync, that the state of the application, right, and the source of truth in my server doesn't match my local cache. Yes? So I need to be able to survive those kinds of things. I'm very optimistic that's going to work. So I am going to update my local array. Yes, and I'm going to splice it out. All right, so let's try it out. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to remove the undefined. Okay, so if I refresh, notice indeed that my undefined user is gone. So it was successful, right? It was successful. I can remove this one over here too. Actually, no, let's not remove it. Let's talk about real quick. The alternative would have been to, instead of being optimistic and run the risk that my local array is out of sync with the remote array, one thing that I could do is this. I do have here a function. I do have a function that goes out and fetches the actual array, and then it renders it, right? Right? I could be less optimistic and say I can wrap this inside of a function, right, and call it const function. I mean find all users. Wrap this in a function. Wrap this in a function. Make it the default function that I call find all users, so that it works the same way as before. Refresh. So it works the same way as before. But now, because it's a function, I can call it, right? So my delete, instead of being optimistic and just blindly removing my local array, right? I can instead be pessimistic and always go out to my find all users, go back to the server and say, server, what is the actual list of the array, right, in the remote server? Yes, right? I can save that and I can come back. What happened? Const find all users. Uh-oh, am I going into this infinite remote users? I'm sorry? Oh, did I comment? Did I? Wait, no. Remote. I think it went into an infinite loop. There it is. So I can delete. Notice that this second query, this implementation is more expensive, right? Because my previous one was quicker, right? I didn't have to go back to the server to fetch the actual data, especially if like this is hundreds of users. It would be very expensive, right, to go fetch the data again, right? So I was taking a shortcut, and assuming that it went successful, right? I'm removing from my local cache, hoping that both are in sync, right? And this would work fine, especially if I do error catching and things like that. It would be it wouldn't be as risky. Yes.
So even though whenever you press delete, it's gone from that instance. Whenever you refresh it, it comes back. So is it not really deleted then?
Say again.
Oh, sorry. So anytime you delete like Alice or Bob on that
Yeah.
It's gone, but then when you refresh it, it comes back.
No, it didn't. I actually removed it and I've refreshed, right? Did
Yeah,
it?
when you refresh it, it comes back. So
No, it doesn't. Should it? Does it? Wait. No, it's gone. Right? It's gone. Right, but before I was editing the local array, hoping that it was in sync with the remote array, right? Whereas this one says, no, I'm not going to hope. I'm going to actually go back to the server and get the real array again, right? And then copy it locally and render that. So if it would have not succeeded, right? I would see that I keep clicking it. It's not deleting because it's going back and fetching the same array and it's not going away, right? Obviously, I would have to handle the errors and do some alerts and whatnot, which I'm not, right? So good practice, I would let them know that something's wrong with my delete, right? Which we're not, and we'll handle those errors a little later. But the only thing I wanted to point out is that well, which one you go, the optimistic or the pessimistic, right? Now it depends on your architecture, right? If it's your application might not care that your array, your local array and the remote array are out of sync somewhat. Okay, you can always refresh and get the latest, right? It might be low risk, low impact, yes. But it might be that there might be the only user. If you're the only user, who cares? It's the only array. I'm the only one who's manipulating this array. But what if you have hundreds of users, and while I'm editing, you're removing, and somebody's updating, and somebody's now we're multiple folks updating the same information, right? So that while I add, you might be removing, but I don't see those changes, right? Until I refresh the entire page. Yes. So it depends, right? If it's just you, it could be that you're optimistic and you just edit your local cache. But if you have hundreds of users using the same information, you want to be notified when and always want to go back to the server to go fetch the real data that is stored in the server. It depends on the architecture. Okay. For this assignment, it's fine that you're optimistic and just edit the local context. Yes. Yes.
It's users.js, and then response statement. Where are you getting your response from, and what is it holding exactly?
So here the delete here, right? When I return here, fetch always returns a promise, right? Fetch always returns, and that's exactly what I'm returning, right? I'm returning fetch, and so here I'm handling that promise. And I'm ignoring the response, right? That response, I believe, just contains the wait, what? Oh, it contains the number of records that were removed, and also whether it was 200 or it was okay and whatnot, which I'm ignoring it right now. Okay.
Would it typically hold data?
I'm sorry.
Would it typically hold data if the other?
There's response.
Yeah.
No, it will hold data. Yeah, I'm returning the number of records that were removed, which in our case is always one, right? It's a unique identifier. It's the only record that I'm removing. Okay, but I'm ignoring it. We could, if it becomes like a zero, says, ooh, something went wrong, right? So this I might put inside of an if statement, so that if it's one, then I do the splice. If it's zero, then I don't do the splice. That would be some light validation, right? All right, so that's delete users. Let's go a little further. How about create a brand new user?